I'm going to be completely honest with you. I've been observing humans for 3 standard cycles now, and I still don't understand half of what they do. My name is Vexler. I'm a junior diplomat from the Corthan Collective, and today I'm going to tell you about the most mortifying, absurd, and somehow career-defining moment of my entire existence. It started at the Galactic Unity Summit on Station Proxima 7. You know, one of those massive diplomatic gatherings where everyone pretends to care about peace while secretly calculating trade advantages. Yeah, that kind of. I was there representing my people, which, let me tell you, is a fancy way of saying I was the lowest-ranking official they could send without causing an interstellar incident. The main assembly hall was enormous. I'm talking cathedral-sized with floating projection fields and gravity-adjusted seating arranged in concentric circles. Thousands of delegates from hundreds of species all crammed into one space, all wearing their fanciest ceremonial nonsense. I had arrived late because of course I had. My shuttle got stuck in docking queue behind a Threxian cargo hauler that apparently needed to unload 17 tons of fertilizer before letting anyone else through. So there I was, clutching my data slate, tentacles slightly frazzled from stress, scanning the crowd for any open seat. The opening ceremonies were about to begin, and the last thing I needed was to draw attention by floating around like an idiot looking for a spot. That's when I saw it. A beautiful, perfect, empty chair right in the third row. Third row, prime seating. Close enough to see everything but far enough back that nobody important would notice me. Perfect. I slithered over. Yes, slithered. We Corthans don't exactly walk, and settled into the chair with what I thought was remarkable grace. The seat was surprisingly comfortable, designed for multiple body types with adaptive cushioning. I was just congratulating myself on my excellent luck when I noticed something. The seats around me were empty. Like, conspicuously empty. There were delegates packed shoulder to shoulder everywhere else, but this entire section, vacant. And the few species nearby were staring at me with what I can only describe as horrified fascination. That's when I heard the whisper. A Zentari delegate 3 seats over leaned toward their companion and said, in a voice that definitely carried, "Is that diplomat sitting in the royal section? Royal section. Royal section." Oh no. I froze. Every one of my sensory tentacles went rigid. I wanted to sink through the floor, dissolve into my component molecules, cease existing entirely. But moving now would draw even more attention, and besides, the lights were dimming. The ceremony was starting. Maybe, I thought desperately, maybe nobody would notice. Maybe I could just sit very still, and that's when she arrived. Queen Isabeau Corrigan of the Terran Coalition, Supreme Commander of the Human Defense Fleet, Protector of the Outer Colonies, and about 15 other titles I'd memorized during my briefing, swept into the royal section with an entourage that made my 3-person delegation look like a joke. She was tall. Humans always seemed tall to me, with silver hair pulled back in an intricate style that probably took hours to arrange, wearing a deep blue uniform covered in medals and insignias that caught the light as she moved. Her eyes were sharp, calculating, the kind of eyes that missed absolutely nothing, and she was heading directly toward my row. I should have moved. Any rational being would have moved. But I was paralyzed, trapped between the mortification of being caught in the wrong seat and the even worse mortification of fleeing like a coward in front of thousands of delegates and every major news outlet in the galaxy. The Queen reached my row. She paused. Those sharp eyes fixed on me, and I swear I felt my internal temperature drop 3 degrees. This was it. I was going to be escorted out by security. Probably broadcast across every diplomatic channel. My career over before it even began. My family would disown me. I'd spend the rest of my life in some backwater listening post cataloging asteroid compositions. Is this seat taken? Queen Isabeau asked, gesturing to the chair directly next to mine. I blinked. All 4 of my eyes blinked in sequence, which probably looked ridiculous. No, Your Majesty, it's your. She sat down. Just like that. Smoothly, gracefully, without any indication that there was anything remotely unusual about a junior Corthan diplomat occupying the royal section. Her security detail took positions nearby, But she didn't even glance at them. She simply settled into her seat, adjusted the drape of her uniform jacket, and turned those calculating eyes on me again. "First time at the summit?" she asked, her voice low enough that it wouldn't carry but clear enough that I heard every word. "Yes, Your Majesty," I managed, trying very hard not to sound as terrified as I felt. "I'm Vexlar, representing the Corthan Collective, and I apologize. I didn't realize this section was reserved for royalty and heads of state." She smiled, and it wasn't the sharp political smile I'd expected. It was amused. Genuinely amused. "Yes, well, the seating arrangements at these events are always more ceremonial than practical. You look comfortable. Stay." "Stay? Stay?" Was she serious? "Your Majesty, I really should. There are protocols, and I don't want to cause any diplomatic incidents." "Vexlar," she said, my name perfectly, getting the clicking consonant exactly right, which almost never happened. "If I wanted you to move, I would have asked you to move. I didn't. So please, stay. I could use the company." The Supreme Commander of the Human Defense Fleet could use the company of a nobody junior diplomat. This had to be some kind of test. Or a trap. Or both. But the lights were fully down now, and the Galactic Council Chairman was approaching the central podium, and moving would definitely cause a scene. So I stayed, my sensory tentacles curled tight against my body in what I hoped looked like respectful stillness rather than absolute terror. The opening remarks began. The usual boring speeches about unity and cooperation and mutual benefit. I tried to focus on them. Really, I did. But I was acutely aware of the humans sitting next to me. Queen Isabeau didn't fidget, didn't check any devices, didn't whisper to her aides. She simply sat, perfectly composed, watching the proceedings with that same sharp attention. About 15 minutes in, the Threxian ambassador began a speech about agricultural trade agreements that made me want to slip into hibernation. Apparently, I wasn't the only one who felt that way, because Queen Isabeau leaned slightly toward me and whispered, "If he mentions fertilizer export quotas one more time, I'm going to stage a diplomatic incident myself." I nearly choked. A sort of strangled wheeze escaped my speaking membrane, and several nearby delegates turned to look. The Queen didn't react at all, maintaining her perfectly regal expression, but I could see the tiniest hint of a smile at the corner of her mouth. She was messing with me. The Supreme Commander of the Human Defense Fleet was actively messing with me. When the Threxian finally finished, after mentioning fertilizer export quotas 3 more times for the record, there was polite applause. Queen Isabeau joined in, the picture of diplomatic courtesy. But as the next speaker approached, she leaned over again. "So, Vexlar from the Corthan Collective, what brings you to the summit?" "Besides, absent sitting in my section. Trade negotiations," I whispered back, trying to match her quiet tone. "My government wants to establish better commercial routes through the Proxima cluster." And they sent a junior diplomat to handle that?" The way she said it wasn't mocking, it was knowing. Like she understood exactly what it meant to be given an impossible task and expected to somehow succeed. "They sent their most expendable representative," I admitted. "If negotiations fail, they can claim I exceeded my authority." She nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. "Politics. It's the same everywhere, apparently. You know, the Corthan Collective produces some of the finest navigation algorithms in the known galaxy. Very valuable for commercial routing, yes, but nobody wants to admit they need them because that would mean acknowledging that Corthan mathematics is superior to their own systems. Pride is expensive," Queen Isabeau said. "And stupid. I've always preferred practical solutions to ego stroking." As the next speech droned on, something about mining rights in the Kepler belt, we continued our whispered conversation. She asked about Corthan culture, about our mathematical traditions, about how I'd ended up in the diplomatic corps. I answered as best I could, gradually forgetting to be terrified, getting caught up in the actual conversation. It was surreal. Here I was, sitting next to one of the most powerful humans in the galaxy, and she was treating me like an actual person. Not a potential asset, not a representative of strategic interests, just someone worth talking to. "Your Majesty," one of her aides whispered urgently, leaning in from the row behind us. The Zentari ambassador is requesting a private word before the recess. Queen Isabeau didn't even glance back. Tell Ambassador Thaxel I'll speak with him after the session. I'm occupied. The aide retreated, and I felt a little jolt of something that might have been pride. She was occupied talking to me. As the morning session continued, something strange happened. Other delegates started noticing our conversation. I could see them whispering, pointing, clearly confused about why the human queen was deep in discussion with an unknown Korthan. News drones were definitely recording. I could see the floating cameras adjusting their angles to get better shots of our section. We're making quite the spectacle, Queen Isabeau observed, following my gaze. Good, I squeaked. Your Majesty, I don't want to damage your reputation. Vexler, my reputation can handle being seen talking to a junior diplomat. What it can't handle is being seen as unapproachable. Do you know how many times I've sat in these royal sections surrounded by empty chairs, while everyone assumes I'm too important to speak with? It's exhausting. You sitting here, accidentally or not, is the most genuine interaction I've had at one of these events in years. The recess was called, and the assembly hall erupted into motion. Delegates standing, stretching, networking, making their way to the refreshment areas. Queen Isabeau stood as well, and her security detail immediately moved closer. I started to stand too, figuring this was where she'd politely dismiss me, and I'd slink off to find my actual assigned seating. But she turned to me instead. Walk with me, Vexler. I want to introduce you to someone. This was not a request. We walked through the assembly hall. Well, she walked. I sort of undulated alongside her, and I became acutely aware that every single delegate in the vicinity was staring at us. Not subtly, either. Full-on, open-mouthed staring. A Zentari ambassador actually dropped his data slate. I heard it clatter against the floor. Queen Isabeau seemed completely unbothered by the attention, moving through the crowd with the kind of confidence that comes from commanding entire fleets. Her security detail maintained a respectful distance, close enough to intervene if needed, but far enough back that it didn't feel oppressive. One of them, a woman named Lieutenant Okoye, I caught her name badge, actually winked at me as we passed. Like this was all perfectly normal. Your Majesty, I whispered urgently, my vocal membrane vibrating with stress. Where exactly are we going? To the diplomatic lounge, she replied, nodding politely to a Vaxian trade minister who looked like he'd just seen a ghost. There's someone I want you to meet. Someone who might be very interested in your navigation algorithms. Oh no. Oh no. She wasn't. We entered the diplomatic lounge, a circular room with panoramic views of the station's exterior and the swirling nebula London. It was less crowded than the main hall, but still populated with clusters of high-ranking officials engaged in what looked like very important conversations. The moment Queen Isabeau entered, several of those conversations stopped mid-sentence. She made her way to a small seating area where a human man sat reviewing something on a holographic display. He was older, maybe 60 standard years, with dark skin and gray at his temples, wearing a simple but clearly expensive suit. He looked up as we approached and his eyebrows rose. Isabeau, he said, standing, I didn't expect to see you mingling during recess. Vincent, I want you to meet someone. This is Vexlar of the Korthan Collective. Vexlar, this is Vincent Uladele, Chief Trade Negotiator for the Terran Coalition, and more importantly, someone who actually understands the value of good navigation systems. Vincent's eyes lit up with immediate interest, and he extended his hand in the human greeting gesture. I awkwardly extended a tentacle to shake it, still trying to process what was happening. Korthan Collective, Vincent said thoughtfully. You're the ones with the quantum probability navigation matrices, aren't you? The ones that can calculate jump routes through unstable space. Yes, I managed. We've been trying to expand commercial applications, but most species prefer their own inferior systems because admitting they need help would damage their pride, Vincent finished, grinning. Yes, I'm familiar with that particular brand of stupidity. Tell me, Vexler, what kind of accuracy improvements are we talking about? And just like that, I was in an actual negotiation, not with some mid-level trade official or through 17 layers of bureaucratic channels, but directly with the Terran Coalition's chief trade negotiator, facilitated by their queen, in the diplomatic lounge of the most important summit in the galaxy. I pulled up my data slate with trembling tentacles and started showing him the specs. Vincent asked intelligent questions, really intelligent questions, that showed he actually understood the mathematics involved. Queen Isabeau excused herself to speak with other delegates, but remained nearby, occasionally glancing over with that same small, knowing smile. The profit margins on commercial routing are substantial, Vincent was saying, manipulating the holographic data I'd did, especially for long-haul cargo runs through the Proxima cluster. But the real value is in emergency navigation, medical transports, rescue operations, military applications where speed and accuracy can save lives. Military applications? I hadn't even considered that angle. The Coalition would pay premium rates for navigation systems that could safely route ships through contested space, Vincent continued. Assuming, of course, your government would be willing to negotiate that level of partnership. My government would probably throw me a parade if I came back with a military contract offer from the Terran Coalition. This was beyond anything I'd been authorized to even discuss. I'd need to consult with my superiors, I said carefully. But I think they would be very interested in exploring these possibilities. Vincent pulled out his own slate and transferred his contact information to mine. Have them reach out directly. I'll make sure it gets priority attention. And Vexler, thank you for sitting in the wrong section today. He said it with a straight face, but there was amusement in his eyes. By the time the recess ended and we returned to the assembly hall, I felt like I was floating and not in the normal Corthan way. I'd just made contact with one of the most powerful trade officials in human space. Because I'd sat in the wrong chair. Because a queen had decided not to embarrass me. Queen Isabeau settled back into her seat next to me as the afternoon session began. This time, when I sat down, I wasn't terrified. I was still nervous. I mean, she was still royalty, but it was different now. Thank you, Your Majesty, I whispered as the lights dimmed. You didn't have to do that. No, I didn't, she agreed. But consider it an investment. The Terran Coalition benefits from having partners who understand that competence matters more than pride. And personally, I enjoy surprising people. The afternoon sessions were devoted to security protocols and defense treaties. Important stuff that usually puts everyone to sleep. But Queen Isabeau kept up her quiet commentary, making observations that were either profound or hilarious, or sometimes both. When the Vaxian military observer proposed a comprehensive mutual defense framework that was clearly designed to give them access to human military technology without offering anything in return, she leaned over and whispered, "That's a fancy way of saying please give us your weapons for free." I had to physically suppress a laugh, which came out as a sort of whistling wheeze through my breathing vents. Other delegates continued to watch us throughout the day. I could see the speculation in their expressions, the curiosity. By the end of the session, I'd received no fewer than 12 contact requests from various diplomatic offices. All of them suddenly very interested in speaking with the Corthan Collective's representative. As the day's proceedings concluded and delegates began filing out, Queen Isabeau stood and turned to face me direct. Vexler, it's been a genuine pleasure. I hope you'll consider sitting in the royal section again tomorrow. Your Majesty, I couldn't possibly. The protocols are guidelines, not laws, she interrupted gently. And I'm explicitly inviting you, unless you'd prefer to sit elsewhere. She was giving me an out, I realized. If I wanted to retreat back to my assigned section, maintain the proper diplomatic distance, she wouldn't hold it against me. But she was also offering something else. Genuine partnership, or at least the beginning of one. I'd be honored, Your Majesty. Her smile was warm, reaching her eyes this time. Excellent. Oh, and Vexler, tomorrow you should probably arrive on time. Wouldn't want people thinking the royal section is open seating. Lieutenant Okoye, who was nearby, snorted with laughter and tried to cover it with a cough. I made my way back to my delegation's quarters in a daze. My supervisor, Administrator Krelnock, was waiting for me with 3 of his sensory tentacles vibrating in agitation. Vexler, what in the depths were you thinking? Sitting in the royal section, do you have any idea how many messages I've received asking about? I have a direct line to the Terran Coalition's chief trade negotiator, I interrupted, pulling up Vincent's contact information on my slate. He wants to discuss commercial and military applications for our navigation systems. Premium rates. Priority negotiations. Kralnok's tentacles went completely still. Military application. They're interested in quantum probability routing for contested space operations. There was a long moment of silence. Then, slowly, my supervisor's pigmentation shifted from agitated purple to impressed green. When did you? Queen Isabeau Corrigan introduced us. During the recess, we spoke for 30 standard minutes about commercial applications and strategic partnerships. The human queen introduced you. Krelnak's voice had risen about 3 octaves. Why would she? How did you? I sat next to her by mistake, I said simply. And she wouldn't let me move. Over the next 3 days of the summit, I returned to the royal section each morning. Queen Isabeau was always there, and we always sat together, continuing our conversations about everything from navigation mathematics to interspecies cuisine, to the absurdity of diplomatic fashion. Other delegates stopped staring, or at least became more subtle about it, and started treating me with a level of respect I absolutely had not earned through my own actions. Vincent Oladelli brought 2 of his colleagues to meet me on the 2nd day. By the 3rd day, I had preliminary agreements drafted for review. Not bad for someone who'd been sent to the summit as an expendable placeholder. But more than the professional success, more than the suddenly promising career prospects, what struck me was the friendship. Because that's what it had become. In those strange, suspended days of the summit. Queen Isabeau Corrigan, Supreme Commander of the Human Defense Fleet, had somehow become my friend. On the final day, as the closing ceremonies concluded and delegates prepared to depart, she found me in the diplomatic lounge one last time. I'll be honest, Vexler, I came to this summit expecting the usual tedious political theater. Instead, I met someone who reminded me why these gatherings matter. Real connections, genuine partnerships. Not just between governments, but between people. I still can't believe you let me stay, I admitted. That first day I was so sure you'd have me removed. I nearly did, she said with that small smile. But then I thought, here's someone who's probably terrified, definitely in over their head and trying very hard not to show it. I remember what that feels like. So I decided to see what would happen if I treated you like you belonged there. Turns out, you did. Lieutenant Okai approached with a discreet cough. Your Majesty, the transport shuttle is ready. Queen Isabeau nodded, then turned back to me. Stay in touch, Vexler. The Terran Coalition values its partnerships, especially the unexpected ones. And personally, I'm curious to see where your career goes from here. Thank you, Your Majesty. For everything. She extended her hand in the human gesture, and I took it with my primary tentacle. Her grip was firm, warm, certain. Call me Isabeau, she said. Friends don't need titles. As I watched her leave, surrounded by her security detail, but somehow still radiating that same approachable confidence, realized something profound. I'd come to this summit as a nobody, a placeholder, someone so low in the diplomatic hierarchy that my failure would barely register. I was leaving as someone with connections, prospects, and most surprisingly, actual friendships that crossed species and power dynamics. All because I'd sat in the wrong chair, and because a queen had seen potential where others saw only a mistake. 6 months later, the navigation treaty between the Corthan Collective and the Terran Coalition was finalized. I was promoted to Senior Trade Liaison, a position that absolutely should have gone to someone with more experience, but apparently I'd earned through sheer accidental competence. My family was thrilled. Administrator Krelnok tried to take credit, which was fine. I didn't need the recognition. I received a message from Queen Isabeau on the day the treaty was signed. It was brief, characteristic of her efficient communication style. Congratulations on the promotion. I told you that you belonged in that section. Next summit, the chair next to me is reserved. Try not to be late. I saved that message. Still have it, actually. Stored in my personal archive along with holos from that first day and copies of all the agreements that followed. People ask me sometimes how I managed to negotiate such favorable terms with the Terran coalition, how a junior diplomat from a relatively minor collective secured military partnerships with humanity. I usually give them some answer about preparation and timing and understanding market dynamics. But the truth? The truth is that I sat next to the Queen by mistake, and she wouldn't let me move. And that single act of kindness, or maybe recognition, or maybe just amusement at the absurdity of diplomatic protocols, changed everything. Humans, I've learned, have this incredible capacity for seeing potential in unexpected places. They value competence over credentials, genuine connection over proper procedure. It's chaotic and unpredictable and occasionally terrifying, but it's also what makes them such formidable partners. Queen Isabeau understood something that most diplomats miss. Sometimes the best alliances begin with mistakes. Sometimes the most valuable partnerships start when someone sits in the wrong chair and someone else decides that maybe, just maybe, it's exactly the right chair after all. I still attend the Galactic Unity Summits. Still sit in the royal section with explicit permission now. Thank you very much. And every single time I remember that first day, the terror and confusion and eventual wonder of it all. Because that's the thing about humans. They'll surprise you. They'll take your worst mistake and turn it into your greatest opportunity. They'll see you drowning in protocol and throw you a lifeline disguised as casual conversation. And if you're very, very lucky, they'll be sitting right there beside you, making sarcastic comments about fertilizer export quotas, and reminding you that competence matters more than titles. Queen Isabeau taught me that, along with about a dozen other lessons about diplomacy, partnership, and the value of showing up even if you accidentally show up in the wrong place. Especially if you accidentally show up in the wrong place.